This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.
Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us tonight Mr. Buck Melton. Welcome, Buck.
Glad to be here.
Well, we've had lots of interchanges on lots of subjects. Some of them are sort of arcane, some of them are less so. But tonight we're going to talk about a pretty interesting thing, and that is the relationship between law and justice. Now, you've had a lot of legal experience, have you not? Why don't you talk about your legal background?
Well, it's mostly ivory tower. I've got a doctorate in American constitutional history, and on top of that I have a law degree, and I have these two degrees from the great mutual antagonists of North Carolina, Duke and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, which makes Tech, Georgia look pretty tame by comparison.
Yeah, they're pretty rough customers up there.
Well,
they don't play around.
They are physically close enough to be able to get at each other a lot more easily.
Pretty tough gang up there, well, you're well out of it, Bucky,
yes,
to get involved in all that difficult situation. Well, now this is something that comes along a lot. I think we've talked about issues that pertain to law, but there's some kind of light on top of the mountain, and that's justice. And the question is, for the American people these days, is our law courts, our law system, is it really providing justice for the American people? I mean, whatever that is. I mean, that's a little softball I'll throw at you. What do you?
I'm not sure if you can say that justice, that a group of people or a large mass of people get justice. I think justice, by its very nature, tends to be individualized. And I suppose we could all do well to read Portia's, is it a soliloquy on justice and mercy that falls as a gentle rain from heaven?
Yeah, that's a good one, yes.
Blessing both the giver and the receiver. As opposed to law, which is very rigid, it's very regimented, it is designed to apply to large masses of people. The rule of law, rule means regular, or same root as regimentation, that you have to treat everybody alike because there's so many of them, and if you get into a case-by-case basis, it becomes tremendously inefficient. So that's the balance.
Well, so just looking at this, I mean, in a state of nature, presumably laws aren't so needed. We have all these laws, these restraints are being daily put upon us. So the amount of laws that are being ginned out by our representatives, there's an enormous number of them, and they're covering all kinds of subjects in your daily life. They never seem to go away, do they? So there's more and more law, which basically there's a restraining mechanism. It's a control issue. So law is attempting to basically check the individual will, if you want to put it that way.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it, because in a state of nature, the only law is that you can do whatever you can get away with.
Yes.
And in Lockean theory and Jeffersonian theory, that you and I give up that right to do whatever we want for the common good and some sort of degree of security as to our persons or property.
Yes.
And therein lies the balance.
So there's a trade-off. So
yes.
We could say that our will has to be restrained in order to find a cure for cancer, or to be able, as they say, to get on a jet plane and fly to San Francisco or whatever. We have or get a big hamburger, or be able to watch a football game on television.
Yes.
So all these benefits come to us because laws are restraining the individual will. Is that a...
Yes, and the downside of that, the place that I think I see you going, was best expressed by, of all people, Jerry Ford, when he was a representative. The government that is powerful enough to give you everything you ever wanted is also powerful enough to take away everything you ever had.
Yes.
And that is the problem of regularizing things too much. And if you see a problem, to say that the immediate answer is to pass another law.
Yes. And laws can, besides restraining your will, the law can give you things, can it not? So it can say, well, we're going to give you a big tax break, or we're going to give you some kind of special treatment. So the the lawmaking bodies are really passing out all sorts of both restrictions and goodies to people.
Yes, carrot and stick. So,
And
and sometimes both in the same law. So.
So having said that's the sort of way the law has been structured, and we could talk some more about that. The idea of people assume that this arrangement that's been put together is going to give them justice, some kind of very, the blue alpine flower, the small flower in the mountains. This beautiful thing is going to happen. The American system is going to give you justice, which means that if you're in conflict, we could talk about what it does or doesn't mean, but the idea, it's something very good, people want it. It's connected to a word that's often heard today, fairness,
Yes.
whatever. It also, what we really get into a little bit, I'm happy we have a lawyer among us tonight, is the idea of a contract. So maybe there's some kind of crude contract that exists between the individual and society where they're going to surrender everything, they're going to get laws, and out of this bright flower will bloom.
Well, I could spend hours unpacking what you've said in the last 2 minutes.
I'll give you like 2 minutes.
Yes, I'll give it a try. First of all, when people do use words like justice and fairness, it reminds me of two anecdotes, one of which was told to me by my father, Buck Melton Sr., who himself is a lawyer, and another by a law professor at said Chapel Hill, and they're both very similar. The first one from my father. The attorney comes out of, and I'll modernize it a bit. The attorney comes out of the courtroom and he pulls out his phone and he sends a text message to his client, "Justice has prevailed." A second later, he gets a text message back, "Appeal immediately." It was my law professor at UNC put it this way: your client does not want justice, your client wants to win.
Yes.
So whenever you hear somebody talk about it's not fair, it usually means I'm not getting what I want. And anyone who has had their blood pressure shoot up astronomically at the DMV or at the Social Security office or in any sort of government bureaucratic place like that, or getting a passport, is feeling what it is like to come up against the law, the unremitting, regularized, triplicate carbon copy law. And that's not what they want. They want what they want, and that's not it.
And so people, it's this system that we have, sort of you could say the American way. We've got this, and you mentioned the Lockean kind of viewpoints, all this which is quite a journey to undertake, going through the way that where our philosophical roots in the Western world exist, and in many ways it underpins American life these days. But people imagine the system is going to give them justice, and maybe justice means several things. Maybe it's like the Oxford English Dictionary. There are 3 meanings or 4 meanings. Meaning number 1 is the one you'd like to have,
yes,
which is everything is just comports with God's will, if you could say it that way.
Yes.
And the second one is I want what I want, and when I say it's fair, it means I get that extra hamburger, and my evil mother-in-law or whatever, or some person that bothers you they don't get it. I get it.
Yes.
And that's fair. And justice is when our wills are in conflict with one another on any subject.
Yes.
And my will is the one that prevails, and that's justice.
Yes, and there's also a hazard of conflating those two definitions, that we all want a world in which there is perfect harmony and peace.
Yes.
And we see ourselves as having what we want if we're in that world.
Right.
In a world, in a perfectly harmonious and peaceful world, we
Right.
get all the hamburgers we want.
Right.
So.
Well, now let's talk about the need for law. So presumably in I'll say a state that's a moral state, if I could say a homogeneous moral group of people, maybe we can pick, I don't know, it's a group of monks, we could say that. I mean, whatever. I mean, they seem a pretty harmonious group there. Probably laws would not be as necessary because people would they recognize the same cultural imperatives, the same moral imperatives. So people would constantly being sort of a thee-thou kind of thing. They would not want to invoke the law in disputes. They'd say, so the laws become more necessary as the country becomes less homogeneous, more diverse, and less of a common sense of a cultural identity, I guess you'd say.
Yes. Well, if you look at laws as the the outgrowth of politics. Politics, if you put it in political science terms, is the process of authoritatively allocating values for a society. And if different groups have different values or place different values on different things, then the possibility of conflict goes up. And therefore you need to have a more formal means of distribution of values. And so as society starts getting different ideas, and you see this really come out very well in the history of the American Revolution and the idea of representation and taxation without representation.
Yes.
And the colonists would beat this drum and saying, we have taxation but we have no representation. And Parliament would reply, what are you talking about? Of course you've got representation. You're commoners, there's a House of Commons, the House of Commons
Yes.
represents commoners, no problem.
Yes.
And the colonists would say, no, a commoner is not a commoner is not a commoner. Massachusetts fishermen and Massachusetts merchants have different economic interests and therefore values
Yes.
from Virginia tobacco growers
Yes,
and Georgia
yes,
indigo
yes,
growers.
yes.
So,
So one of the things is, I guess what I'm saying is, it's true enough, this ideal sort of the monastery, that world, just our common, just the way the world is, it makes it impossible not to have increasing laws, increasing need for some kind of, I guess, restraints. Now, what about the idea of a contract? Is that one of the things that's disturbing people now when they feel like things are not just or things are not fair? I'm going to use the two sort of synonymously in a way. Is there sort of a perceived contract that people have with society, and that contract says, I live in a secular world. Everything that's going on is, my whole deal is what happens in my 70-year lifespan, or longer or shorter by a decade, whatever the number is. That's it. That's it for me. So the contract is, I'm going to brush my teeth every day, shine my shoes, and I'm going to get something. I'm going to get this or I'm going to get that, and the law is going to arrange for me to get these issues. And if it doesn't, then the contract has been violated, and I no longer have any responsibility to observe the law.
yes.
Any thoughts about that?
I'd like to look at it at a more basic level even than that. If you take contract as an expression of individual will, or of the will of the contracting
Maybe
parties.
maybe you've studied contracts in law, but law school. But go ahead.
A little,
go ahead.
yes,
you may be able to make a comment about it.
But let's take anarchism as an example.
Yes.
One of the pure examples of anarchism is an entire, and I'm not talking about the type of anarchist who throws bombs.
Yes,
I'm talking
yes.
about anarchism as a governing philosophy.
Yes. Right. Yes.
The pure example of anarchism would be all of us living together harmoniously in a completely contract-based society where there is no government that is enforcing contracts.
Yes.
Because we're all so good-natured, we can enforce the individual contracts ourselves. It comes about as close as you can to the Lockean state of nature that is conducted in a civil fashion.
Yes.
And the opposite of contract is status. When
Yes.
you are told, this is what you do, this is who you are,
Right.
And there's no appeal from them. You're a serf, you're a slave.
Or you're the king.
Or you're a king, yes, or you're a noble.
Yes.
And there is going to be no migration from the status of serfdom to the status of titled landed
Yes.
nobility.
Yes.
Now, in order to make that sort of society more palatable, we've adopted the Lockean fiction that we are based on the social contract, that you, in fact, live in a system in which the government is the product of a social
Yes,
contract.
yes.
But did you sign a contract?
No.
Did you agree to this contract?
Nothing. No.
Yes, neither did I. This contract is between the people, this vast,
Right,
ambiguous
right,
force called
right.
the people, and the government. If you start to look at it, there's a lot more of status in our society than there is of contract. And not just from the government,
Right,
but
right.
from institutions.
Right,
When is the last time you haggled with the server behind the counter for the price of a Big Mac?
I don't think I ever have.
Yes, there is no haggling.
Yes.
It's status.
Right.
You're the cattle, not the
Right,
not
right.
the cow. You go in, you pay for the Big Mac, and if you don't pay their price, they don't give you one.
So, I mean, does contract mean dispute, or does it mean interchange? I guess what I'm getting into is this: some of the tensions in the world are that people have presumably there's sort of such a hazy contract. Each side can think what they want about the contract.
Yes.
So you can think I've got some kind of contract that's going to give me my notion of justice. And if I don't get it, I'm going to be very upset. But there's never been an official contract that's been signed or not signed. And that's going to cause a lot of issues. Maybe you could look at the situation in Greece when people imagined they had sort of a contract with society.
Yes.
And maybe in many places it's that way. You could say about some of the trouble in Egypt or whatever. I mean, the things that you imagine the world's going to give you, particularly the government, and it doesn't happen. The life you imagine you have because you've brushed your teeth every day and done whatever, it just doesn't happen. That causes a lot of social unrest and tensions.
Yes.
And you know, you've spoken before about the, I don't know, fragility of the Western world, things that are out there, particularly with economic circumstances. But the perceptions that as an American citizen, this kind of contract is, I'm going to get $1 zillion. I'm going to like whatever it is. I'm going to fly in my private jet to wherever I go all the time. You know, it's going to have this tremendous deal. That's what it is to be an American. If the system can't do that, it's going to be a big problem. Likewise, I mean, many people, they say the American dream is to get some kind of secular Valhalla. I mean,
Yes,
and I mean,
yes.
and the system can't get it, and the sense of frustration and social unrest might be rising for those reasons.
Yes, and it's hard. The gap between the richest and the poorest is greatly increasing. On the other hand, you have things that the poor, or I won't say the poorest, the homeless, for instance, but the poor segment of society has access to things today that the greatest kings of antiquity didn't have.
Yes.
And yet, even though they've got a satellite dish and they've got the Big Macs and
Yes.
they've got telephones, they still might not have job security.
Yes.
They might not have good health coverage.
Right.
And they certainly don't have what the Ted Kennedys and Bill Gateses of the world
Right,
have.
right.
And that's going to create unrest. And it's going to create the stock statement, it's not fair.
Yes.
And until we have enough resources whereby everyone can live like a Bill Gates, what
Yes.
do you do?
Well, you've quoted Shakespeare. I mean, the fault, I'll quote him too, the fault, dear Brutus, is not in ourselves, but in the stars. So maybe it's the human nature. You know, not everybody can live on top of the mountain. It's just the way the deal is. I mean, it's just, and it's caused social conflict for a long time, certainly since Neolithic era ended.
Well, moving
So-
the goalposts. I mean, I live better in almost any regard than the czars of Russia or
Sure.
Ivan the Great or whatever. So by the time I get to a Bill Gates level,
Yes.
how's Bill Gates living?
Right,
So,
right.
yes.
Well, one I'll just tell one kind of apocryphal story. Is this a rather true one. But once again, back to Shakespeare, but the character on which Falstaff was based was a true person, and there's this sort of a biography of the guy, and he lived in the 16th century. He was quite a guy, rotund, a great drinker, dare I say, womanizer, wealthy. He was afflicted at the end of his life with terrific shortness of breath. In a rather touching scene, he puts on his golden robes and his jewels, and he's just walking around huffing and puffing, and is miserable in this state of wealth because his health is gone. It means nothing. And one of the gifts that society is given is extraordinary, as you well say. The anticipation of fairness, or another thing that's out there, is the idea that it's fair for you to live, to be totally healthy and be 90 years old. I mean,
Yes.
that's what's going to happen, and it's fair for no particular reason that you accomplished, but it's just owed to you because you were born here or have come here.
Well, we're getting into dueling Shakespeare here, but now Henry V, the wonderful line, can you who command the beggar's knee command the health of it? And we seem to be trying very much to command the health of the beggar's knee.
Yes.
Through of course public appropriations, and we have a technology that's getting darn close to being able to do that. So.
Now, going back to these words again, I mean, these are, we discussed this earlier about the secular world, and maybe I'll mention the divine world. So the people have there's a lot of focus on justice here, and there's also a lot of focus on secular law, and there's relatively little, people are not reposing as much confidence in the hereafter as the other generations did. And if you repose a lot of confidence in the hereafter, then these issues become less intense.
All the inequities will be addressed in the fullness of time.
And so it really it's so what I'm saying is one of the things going on is the secular state, and I've used the word neo-pagan, the secular actually it's my Sunday school lesson is coming up. I don't want to give anything away, but these concepts are out there. And the state is sort of pursuing them in many ways, and the lifestyle that people have is, in that direction. But it's causing a lot of tension because everyone's idea of justice cannot be easily reconciled, and everyone is demanding that the law either restrict their enemies or give them something.
Yes.
And you don't have those problems if you're looking at some kind of divine system. And in general, throughout human history, it would be very unusual to have a total secular state here.
Yes.
The religious systems generally address these issues
Yes.
about what's fair and what's just in the next world.
Well, I think you would say that if the system is working properly, the problems are reduced. They're obviously not eliminated, or we would have had the utopian society.
Sure.
And of course, when religion goes wrong, it can be one of the worst forces.
Just so.
And one of the most inequitable as well. But that's what you strive for. And that's really the weapon that the church has always had against the state. And it's something that the state simply can't touch, although it's trying to do it with the new civil religion that it's trying to inculcate for since the Enlightenment.
Yes.
So.
Well, I mean, I would even say longer than that. I won't belabor it, but you could make the case just with Christianity that the way Christianity started is it blossomed and it spread into around the world in Northern Europe or whatever, and it took over a lot of the sort of pagan rituals. And you could talk about Bede, or some people call him Beta, the Venerable.
Bede. Yes.
Bede, the English don't pronounce it that way. I would say Bede, but they say Bede because it's complicated. That's the way it sounded in the 7th century or 8th, and the pronunciation changed. The Brits keep the old one. Okay, my little fact.
You learn things every day.
All right, I hope I enlightened you. But the takeaway message is, he said they're going to Christianize the Anglo-Saxons. Let's use the pagan temples. Let's do this. Let's do that. So so Christianity kind of moved in there. But I would submit there's always this uneasy tension between the pagans and Christians, or you could say, I guess, people that believe in a divine ethical system, whatever that is. But there's always been this tension, and it flourished in the Renaissance. You could say whatever Becket and whatever Henry II, Becket, who'll read me this troublesome priest. You've always had this tension there. And it's becoming a little unbalanced. The secular state is getting more powerful, and with it, an unhingement of societal cohesion. I don't know if that's too frightening to say.
There's no power to set up against the state. And the thing that has been protecting us since Enlightenment days is essentially the Montesquieuian balance of power, separation of powers, federalism. But then when these things begin to break down, as they have on occasion in our society, but now the breakdown seems more systemic. The growth of the unitary government. And if the unitary government is dysfunctional, then you've got a big problem. So.
And one of the issues is, we get slightly into this. We get back to law and justice and what the two are, and the role of the state in this, and the propagating laws, doing things, protecting people, giving people something. Many times, if the state tilts enough in your personal interest, whatever that is. So I got my homestead exemption, or hey, look, I'm entitled to go into national parks for free, or what, I'm an old guy, I get in for free, whatever little things I get here. I've got, whatever. Maybe I'm getting free health care. Things are out there. The tendency is to give the government a blank check to do other things. And you could make the comment about what happened with the Nazis. The idea is they had a very the government was doing a lot of things for the average German citizen. They were giving, I don't know, lots of good benefits. They had more jobs, the wages were up, they had sundry, summer camps. Everybody got to go into summer camps. They had, these trips were arranged, Peace for Joy, and so
Yes.
I'm getting all this stuff. The government can do whatever it wants. Just as long as I get my hamburger here.
Yes.
And the government was attempting to manipulate citizens by giving them hamburgers to give them a free rein on possibly wicked deeds, which is a danger of the democratic system,
Yes.
a system that put the Nazis in power.
Well, and I think the two big problems we've got now are, first of all, the problem of entitlements, that we simply cannot afford this. And nobody in Congress is even talking about it anymore. That we are 14, 15 trillion in debt, and nobody's even making serious efforts to talk about balancing the budget, much less reducing the national
Yes,
debt.
right.
And secondly is this fetish that we have developed in the wake of 2001 with security, and that we are willing to sacrifice the traditional rights, natural rights that have been recognized and enshrined in the Constitution if it means that we get more security. And those are dangerous things. And I would say that if you really do believe in the social contract, it is not a contract between this generation and the government or among the members of this generation. It is a contract that transcends generations. And we are stewards of these natural rights. We do not, as a generation, have the right or the authority or the power to throw away free exercise of religion or freedom from warrantless searches or freedom from warrantless wiretaps or freedom from due process. Those are not our freedoms to barter away for a sense of security.
Well, Bucky, on that note, thank you for another enlightening session tonight. We'll have
Thank
to
you.
back you again. Thank you a lot. Thanks.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.